family, thanks for watching. So I'm going to try something a little different in this video that we haven't tried before. Back in the day when we were first learning about bees, we were told to always keep a bee journal. And by happen chance, this channel kind of became that. But going forward, I want to try to be a little more intentional with our bee journal entries, so to say. Of course, this weekend we were going through the beehives and couldn't quite remember what we had done the previous year. And now that our channel has gotten a lot more videos on it, it was kind of cumbersome to go through and try to recall the details. So this is more content, and it's a way for us to kind of keep track of what we're doing and how we're progressing. Now, a bee journal will usually have like these kind of specific things that you're looking for. I don't know if professional beekeepers keep bee journals. I assume they have something. If you're working with a lot of hives and you have a lot of hands on deck looking at them, you probably want a way to communicate with each other. And it's very easy, especially year on year, to forget key details or lessons that you learned that come back to bite you in the butt later. Or like us, we're always tweaking and modifying and testing different ideas and systems, and we'll forget what successes we had. It can be a little overwhelming to just memorize all the things that you're supposed to keep track of. Of course, when we started this whole process, we thought we were just going to have one hive, and yeah, that never works that way. Since this is the first one that I'm going to do, I think I'll start with number 101 because why not? So technically this is like 3 inspections over the span of 3 weeks. I didn't have a lot of time on my hands, so I basically spent a day per hive. It's not abnormal for us to spend a couple hours, especially in springtime, looking over everything because you're looking for a lot of different things. So overall, currently we have 3 hives. We have purple, yellow, and green. Weather-wise, we had an extremely warm winter. By February, we were already experiencing mid-spring kind of seasonal things going on, with the occasional like 2-day stint of typical late winter weather. So dropping into like the 50s and 40s or like 10s, below 10 Celsius. I will also make a note, we've had a massive problem with ants, especially like in the greenhouse, and we discovered during this inspection in the beehives. So purple hive. Before I even had a chance to start my inspection, when I opened purple hive, I saw ants billowing out of the feeding area that the bees don't have direct access to. Cleaning that up is largely the reason this inspection took several days. So when trying to determine the health of a hive, there are several factors or indicators to look for, starting with if you see your queen. I did not see the queen in purple hive or eggs. And that was like the first warning sign to me that there were no eggs. Now I know we didn't roll our queen in purple hive because nobody had touched it recently, and there were indications that there had at least been a queen there 5 days ago. I have this really cool book that we got way back in the day that does a fantastic job of kind of explaining all the basics of bees. And I refer to this page specifically all the time because it really tells you a lot about the queen. Basically, for all the bees, whether it's a drone, queen, or just a regular worker, the first 3 days will just be an egg. So if you see an egg, that means that within the last 3 days you had a queen there. About day 4 or 5 is when the egg hatches and becomes larva, and it looks like those little white worms inside of the hexagon comb. And if you see that, that's how we were able to indicate that our queen had been there within the last week. And then as you move on, you've got the next basically 8 to 11 days, depending on whether it's a queen or a drone or a worker. We'll stick with the worker, but basically day 10 is when they will cap the brood. So if you see capped brood, that means you had the queen 10 days previous. For a worker, it takes an average of 21 days to hatch. For a drone, it takes an average of 24, which I always forget and always base everything on the drone's life cycle, which is longer than all the others, and it gets me into a lot of trouble. And then the queen is 16 days. What I also saw was loads of queen cups. We like to leave 1 or 2 of those bulbs on the frame if there's no egg inside of it, because something happened to the queen while we were doing our inspection. They can then take a young egg and put it into the queen cup and then nurture that egg into their new queen. But during this time of year, we kind of try to like to pinch them all because we don't want our hive to swarm. There's lots of cons that you have to be conscious of when you swarm. The biggest one being that you lose resources because they'll take half the honey. The other big thing being is that you take a chance that the genetics that you come back with the new queen, aren't going to be desirable. Some people will set up swarm catches, which we've not yet tried, and maybe going forward in the future we'll do that. But the other thing too you want to look for when you're looking at the queen cups is, have any of them been chewed through? Which means that a queen has hatched and now you're going to have a new queen in their future. But I didn't see any of that in Purple Hive. I just saw the queen cups. And then of course, the last thing obviously you want to be looking at is the honey situation. Is honey capped? Is there honey in it, but it's still in the liquid form? Is the honey comb actually just empty? Now for Purple Hive, the combs were actually just empty with some liquid honey, which means that they were finding a nectar flow on somewhere, but that they had eaten all their stores. Nothing was capped at this point, which would usually suggest that that means you want to start feeding your hive. But just because of the sheer volume of this one, I chose against it, especially with the ant problem going on. I definitely didn't want to invite more pests to the hive. So all of those different aspects are to kind of judge the health and the status of the hive. The other thing you want to look out for is the temperament of the hive. That's always a big deal, especially after a hive has swarmed. You don't want your bees to be super aggressive. We especially keep our bees close to the house and don't want them stinging kids or family friends that come over to visit. But there's also different levels as well. So there's obviously calm, and you will get to learn what that means if you haven't ever had bees. But that's the ideal stage that you want your bees to be in. There's kind of what we call spicy, which is basically they're kind of defending themselves and attacking, but if you walk away for a good distance, they might leave you alone, depending on how much space you have. We happen to have 5 acres, so we can go pretty far. Now, in relation to Purple Hive during this inspection was extremely pissy. They were not happy with me. I had lots of problems doing the inspection. I know I don't have the best hands. My hands shake a lot, and that aggravates bees in general. So bees tend to be a little less calm with me because I anger them. But even after I had finished my inspection, I virtually had to walk to my neighbor's house before the bees stopped following me when I wanted to come inside, which is twice the distance, the average time that they will follow us. Usually if I walk around the chicken coop and back, they will have forgotten about me. But I went twice the distance and they were still following me. These bees were beyond full. I even took out a few frames and gave it to Yellow Hive from Purple Hive because if there was a queen in there, she was going to have nowhere to lay her eggs, which is why I added extra space, extra supers to it. But basically, once you have bees on frames filling out stuff on at least 70 or 80% of the box, that means it's time to put a new one on. Now, whether that's the brood chamber or even the supers, the theory kind of applies. You don't want to just start off with just a bunch of boxes because the bees have to heat all that up. And especially with the weather doing its really crazy roller coaster thing, you want to be able to have them have the power to keep themselves warm. But you also don't want them crammed in there like they were this way. So you want to give them lots more space. Irregularities. This is a section of the beekeeping journal or logbook that usually refers to foul smells, mite issues. The issue with Purple Hive and the ants that I covered first would definitely go here. Yellow Hive. So we saw the queen on Yellow Hive. We saw eggs. In fact, we were able to take eggs and give those to Purple. We saw bees of all stages. We saw eggs, larvae, and capped brood. So we saw them in all stages. We didn't see any queen cells. We did see queen cups, but there was nothing in the queen cups. But we did see eggs, we did see a healthy lading pattern for Yellow, and we saw her. Oh, another quick tangent. If you're looking for the eggs, but for some reason you see if you see two or more eggs in each one, or the egg laying pattern is really odd, it's not that beautiful kind of rainbow pattern with brood, bee bread, and then honey on the outside, then there's a high probability you've got a laying worker, which is again another check mark that you want to pay attention for. And if you see that and you do see your queen, then there's also a high probability that there's something wrong with your queen, in which case there's a very high probability that they will be changing her in the near future. But in this case, the queen was queen right, meaning that she was there and laying in a healthy pattern. We saw some uncapped honey, no capped honey. So even though she's doing all of her other stuff properly, there's definitely an issue with them not getting enough food for the amount of hive level that they are. However, we're still not going to feed them, as I mentioned before, with purple because of the ant problem. Yellow hive is a descendant of yellow hive, swarmed many times, but it still keeps the kind of super docile tendencies. It doesn't produce a lot of brood or honey, but it's reliable. Green hive's genetics, we had honey from it in the first year. That's never been the case with yellow. Yellow is your more traditional hive, in the sense that the first year we just nurtured it and fed it and got the hive healthy. Now, what I had done when I was doing the inspection for purple hive, trying to get it to have more space, is I'd taken a lot of the brood out of purple and we added an extra brood chamber to yellow. And when we went back a couple days later, it was rocking along perfectly. Irregularities. Like I said, I don't know if the moving the hive counts as irregularity. Basically, there were no irregularities with the hive itself. It is not a regular thing that we do, so I will mention it here. The hives were on temporary stands, and we had been meaning to move them for ages because we wanted to be able to get around the hives a little bit easier, especially with two of us in there. Originally, that space was designed for just 2 hives, and we never thought we would get 4. And the other day we were talking about maybe 6, so who knows. Ideally, you want to move a hive at night because any foragers that are out and about, we might struggle finding their way back home if you move it. Even though we were only moving it forward 18 inches, they may be able to figure it out. They may be able to find the pheromones of their old hive and say, oh, my home moved. Okay, here we go. But what we were planning to do would have just been too difficult to do at night. And so we went ahead and leveled out the ground in front of the hives for both green and yellow. We put a square foot concrete base stone and then put a cinder block standing upright on top. We wanted the concrete base flat area because especially with this ant problem we were having, diatomaceous earth is about the only thing we have ever found success with. But with the dirt, it being uneven, sometimes the diatomaceous earth, they can kind of find a way to tunnel between the dirt and still get around the diatomaceous earth, which is what we had noticed they were doing this time. Now, yellow hive is unique. It is an 8 frame, and it is our flow hive. We have yet to have the flow hive work. This will be hopefully our first year, fingers crossed. Okay, so now we're getting into green hive. So green hive, we found the queen, so she was queen right, that was lucky. We struggled to find eggs, not sure what was going on there. That might have just been a me issue, struggling to see, and I need a magnifying glass with a light. Age. But I did see young larvae, I did see capped brood, I did see queen cups, but no eggs in the queen cups. And I saw no capped queen cup. So green hive was definitely a little further back than purple hive. Same story with all the others. I saw very little capped honey, some honey in liquid stage, and some pollen basically stored away, but very little resources. Ooh, pollen pants. Pollen pants is another sign you want to look for when you're looking for your bees. That just means that there is a nectar flow going on and your bees are arduously collecting pollen. Now we've been seeing nectar we've been seeing nectar pants. There we go. We have been seeing nectar pants since February, so I almost forgot about that detail. But yeah, all the hives had that. Temperament of green hive was actually calm. which kind of surprised us. And like I said, is what tipped our hat towards the ants being the problem. Because after doing all these things to help it get rid of the ants, it was just a normal hive and it didn't attack us like the purple hive was. We also too were a bit late at doing our mite treatment this year during this whole thing. So it is possible that between the mites that hadn't yet been treated for the spring ramp up and the ants, that the bees were just spicy because of that. Green hive is a descendant of itself, multiple swarm times, but still basically kind of kept in the same original genetic line. And the population was full. It was again like purple hive in the sense that the frames that we'd pick up would be just so full you couldn't actually see what was going on. Not as bad. Like I said, we were able to see the queen, so the population was definitely ready for that extra brood chamber. So we just went ahead and went back to 2 brood chambers for all of our hive. And then we left the super on with the queen excluder in between it so that they can start going forward with that. I had remembered for green hive to put the super with brood underneath the brood chamber. And so when I went back the couple days later to finish up these inspections that I was doing over this series of 2 weeks, I had delightfully found that all the brood had been hatched and had moved up and the box was empty, and I was able to easily then take that, put it back on top where it rightfully belonged without much headache. So it's so important for these beekeeping logbooks to kind of remember these details. So there we go. Going forward, we've got 2 hives that were queen right. Purple we'll have to keep an eye on. We'll definitely need to do an inspection in 2 weeks because this is the time of year when the hives want to swarm and they're going to want more space. We don't want to give it this second because we just gave them a bunch of space, and we do anticipate next week for it to drop below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is I think 5 or 2 degrees Celsius. But we're looking forward to getting a spring harvest this year. We're looking right on track for it, at least from green hive. And like I say, it'll be interesting if we can get yellow hive into the flow hive this year and actually see it work. But yeah, that's basically our bee journal. And I will be trying to keep this going forward for all the inspections that we do. And for sure, if you aren't keeping a bee journal yourself, definitely start it today. All right, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.